Terrific, thank you. Today is, you got that going? Today's Q&A, open Q&A. Yes?
Earlier today, I heard some Rabbi saying that this upcoming Shavuos, some people keep 2 days, some people keep 1 day. Why would someone physically in Israel, keep 2 days?
It's a good question, why someone would keep 2 days, and there's a difference of opinion about it. Not everybody agrees that a person should. There's a very detailed halachic background to it. I'll give you just skimming off the top, but there are more details that I can't go into right now. There was a time when the arrival of the new month was based on a testimony of witnesses who saw the new moon and gave their testimony in front of the Sanhedrin here in Yerushalayim. And the Sanhedrin then announced that it was the new month. Of course, they announced it, okay, but it's here in Yerushalayim. Well, there was a very spectacular means of communication, which within less than 24 hours spread the knowledge to the vast majority of the Jews outside the land of Israel. And that was the use of mountaintop fires. There's a sequence of mountains between here and Babylonia, and on the night, if they decided on Tuesday, in the daytime, that was the beginning of the month, that night they would light a fire, and then 25 miles down the road where they could see the fire, there was another one, and another one, and another one. In a few hours, all of Babylonia knew that the new month had started, which meant a holiday that was on the 15th of that month, or in this case, the 6th of the month, they knew right away. When it was, there was no problem. And everybody kept 1 day. Everybody kept 1 day. Problem was only to know what the Beis Din in Yerushalayim decided when that month should start. But then, something which you could probably appreciate from contemporary politics and social action, there were people who wanted to confuse the situation and lit phony fires. So then it was a question of distinguishing the right fires from the wrong fires and prosecuting those people and getting the government to be involved, and it was a very complicated situation, and it became impractical. So then they started sending out messengers. Okay, but messengers are slow. They don't travel at the speed of light. So they got so far in a certain period of time. They traveled. They didn't travel on Shabbos, and they had to go over rivers. So the world then divided up into where the messengers got to versus beyond that boundary. Where the messengers got to kept only 1 day because they knew what the Beis Din had decided. The ones beyond that didn't know which day it was. Now, almost always, when you come to the new month, you know theoretically when the new moon could be sighted. The question is whether anybody will actually see it or not. Sometimes it could only be sighted for a half hour. If there are clouds in the sky, nobody's going to see it. So there are only 2 days in which the month could start. So beyond the boundary of where the messengers got to, they didn't know whether the holiday was going to be Tuesday or Wednesday. And therefore they kept 2 days in order not to miss the holiday. That was the general thing. And by the way, in Nisan, the messengers got further than they did in Tishrei, because in Tishrei you have the fact that Yom Kippur is another day in which they don't travel. So sometimes, in some places, they knew in Nisan what the right day was, but in Tishrei they didn't know. It all depended upon where the messengers got to. Now, identifying the new month on the basis of the moon stopped when the Sanhedrin stopped, and we have a fixed calendar. But the custom of when you're beyond the spot where the messengers got to keep 2 days because of the doubt, that custom was maintained. So Gemara and Rabbi discusses how and why you keep customs, even though the original trigger conditions for the custom are no longer apply. But that's what's being done. So now that's how the world divides up for people who don't travel. Now what happens when people travel? Well, one thought is, if you had lived 2,000 years ago beyond the messenger line, and you had traveled to Jerusalem, what would you have done? You'd have kept 1 day, because you would have known. It all depends upon what you know and what you don't know. So today also, if you happen to come to Jerusalem for one holiday, you're doing what 2,000 years ago, if a person did it, would keep 1 day, so you should keep 1 day also. That's one possible, and it's a position that some people take. The other position is we have a general rule that when you come from a place that has certain customs, and you go temporarily to a new place, you don't just switch over all your customs to the new place while you're there, and then switch back when you go back. And for many of the customs, you say, will force you to keep the stringencies of the home that you have, and also the new stringencies of the new place that you come to. That being the case, if you come from Cincinnati to Jerusalem, you'll have to keep 2 days, like they do in Cincinnati. And if you go from Jerusalem to Cincinnati, according to some, you'll have to keep 2 days because you have to have the stringencies of both places. That is a general halakhic idea. That's roughly what's behind those who say that you have to have 2 days. That's background. Yeah, what's noch?
I guess follow-up
Sure,
question.
sure.
So when does Minchag HaMakom factor into?
So it depends upon two things: where your residence is. My Rebbe Zatzal, at a certain period in his life, was equally situated both in Boston and in Jerusalem. He had his synagogues in both places. He had children in both places. He spent half the year in one place and half the other place. And for him, when he was in Jerusalem, he kept the Jerusalem custom, and when he was in Boston, he kept the Boston custom, because there was no place that was his home vis-a-vis traveling to someplace else. I'm not saying everybody would agree with that. It's hard to find anything about the Jewish corpus which everybody agrees with. But that's one way to look at it. And then, if not, then you have to be stringent on both sides. That's a little background to the idea, to the question. Yeah, what else is going on?
Why don't we have Tzaaras anymore?
Why don't we have Tzaaras anymore? First of all, let's just clarify. Tzaaras is often translated in English translation as leprosy, but doctors have told me that the symptoms of Tzaaras aren't the symptoms of leprosy, and the way it proceeds is not the symptom of leprosy. It was a condition that was the result of a certain spiritual condition, and it was miraculous. There's a piece of general philosophy here. Let's start with a very general idea, then I'll try to narrow it down to apply to this case. How much can you expect from a person? What's reasonable to expect from a person? We have a Torah. The Torah has a system of rules. You might think, well, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, and He created each of us, and gave each of us our capabilities, and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu authored and promulgated the Torah, so it must be that we are all able to fulfill all the rules of the Torah. You might think that. It's just wrong, that's all. On the contrary, even though the rules apply equally to everyone, this is now a fairly subtle point, against Kant philosophical philosophy, even though the rules apply equally to everyone, but failure to fulfill the rules doesn't apply equally to everyone. So, if you say they have the traffic, the speed limits on roads, and this person is caught exceeding the speed limit, and it happens to be a time when there was nobody else on the road, but still, speed limits are speed limits. And the policeman pulls him over and he says, "You were speeding?" And he says, "What? I was speeding? Why do you say that?" He says, "Well, look here, I've got the radar gun, I can show you." He says, "But I'm following my speedometer. And my speedometer said I was within the speed limit." So the cop gets in the car and they go driving. His speedometer is off. It's off. It's not registering correctly. When his speedometer says 55, he's really going 70. So we say, did he break the law? Yes, he broke the law. Do the laws apply to him? Yes, the laws apply to him. But is he evil, criminal, rebellious, vicious? No, he's just a victim of a broken speedometer. So the laws apply to everyone, but what your responsibility is for failure to live up to the law will vary from person to person. It'll vary with your age. It'll vary with your education. It'll vary with your temperament. Human temperaments vary greatly, and some temperaments make certain types of challenges easy, and other types of challenges very difficult. So we don't want to say that when the rule is beyond your capacity, it doesn't apply. What we want to say is, when the rule is beyond your capacity, it applies, but since it's beyond your capacity, you don't have to pay a penalty for failure to live up to the rule. So now, where do we start from? Tzaaras, right. So now, Tzaaras is an indication that something's gone wrong. And the assumption is that a person who gets Tzaaras will learn the explanation of where it comes from, and that explanation will enable him to deal with the problem and fix it. Well, that requires a certain amount of seriousness. It requires a certain amount of trust in the Torah and in the Creator to say that this is the right interpretation of what's going on. And not everybody has that. And not everybody will accept that. If you tell someone the reason you have this rash is because God is telling you you're guilty in such and such a crime and you better fix it, suppose the person says, I don't believe you. You don't have it in the medical books, so the medical books are incomplete. Somebody will figure it out, I'll take a salve, I don't have to worry about my spiritual life. You've made him worse. You've made him worse now. Because in addition to the failure that Tzaaras is supposed to be a symptom of to get you to improve yourself, in addition to that, the person is now rebellious. So that being the case, this idea of Tzaaras is a gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I trust you, I have confidence in you, that when I give you this symptom of the problem, you will deal with the problem, the root of the problem, not the symptom, and you'll improve in the way that I'm hoping that you will improve. But if not, not. Similarly, if you see someone who's doing something wrong, and you could tell him the truth, but he won't listen to you, then there's a whole question of whether you should talk to him or not. Because he may not know that what he's doing is wrong. And if he doesn't know that what he's doing is wrong, then he's ignorantly violating. And that's a much lesser crime than violating purposely. And if you tell him, and he says, I don't believe you, or he rebels, and then he continues to do it deliberately, you've made him worse rather than better. Now, there are nuances and times when yes and times when no, but that has to be taken into account. So one of the reasons we don't have Tzaaras anymore is because the benefit that Tzaaras is supposed to have for the person who has it is much less likely to have a positive effect. There is a phraseology, I forget who coined it, but it's commonly used in our circles. Ein balanes maki beniso. A person who has a miracle that happens to him has a terrible temptation not to acknowledge that it's a miracle. Because acknowledging that it's a miracle carries certain responsibility. Oh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did a miracle, so I owe him. And if I owe him, maybe I should do better in fulfilling his laws, and so forth and so on. And then, well, if it was only a happenstance, it only happens accidentally, then I don't have to work on myself, and I don't have to improve, and therefore he doesn't want to admit the miracle. Well, that's a terrible failure, not to admit a miracle. And that being the case, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will use that as one of the reasons to decide whether or not to do a miracle for the person or not. Rav Dessler has an essay on Bitachon v'Hishtadlus, trusting in God and taking responsibility for your own circumstances, trust and endeavor. And he has levels of categories of people. And he says that a person who, a miracle, will not succeed in changing his direction, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not do a miracle for him because it will just make him worse, and he'll use other ways to try to change his direction. So when you're talking about why miraculous events take place or not, these are some of the factors that have to be taken into account, particularly for Tzaaras. Yeah.
I saw a line from Rabbeinu B'chaye, and I couldn't get my hand. If Rabbi wants the source, I could give the source, but I want to say over the line. I don't understand it. He writes like this: Misha yadea nafshay, yadea alakav. Misha ena yadea nafshay, la yadea alakav. I don't understand. Like, okay, I know like what's the connection was he trying to say?
Okay, he who knows his nefesh knows Hashem, he doesn't know his nefesh doesn't know Hashem. Well, the Rabbeinu B'chai was a seminal thinker, a very deep thinker. He's a master of Kabbalah, among other things. He was the Talmud of the Ramban. I'll tell you one thing that could be meant, but he could mean a lot of things by it, and I don't know the whole corpus of the Rabbeinu B'chai. There's an analogy made in many sources between, on the way on the one hand, the soul of the person relates to the body of the person, on the one hand, and the way Hashem relates to the world on the other hand. So, the difference between life and death for a human being is the difference between the interaction of the soul with the body and the lack of interaction of the soul with the body. That's what life and death are. If you've ever seen someone die, I mean, physically, they just stop moving, that's all. Nothing, just something's gone, but and some things keep moving. I mean, your nails keep growing, your hair keeps growing for a few days. I mean, not everything stops. So the soul gives life to the whole body. The soul animates the whole body. Without the soul, the body is dead. The soul carries with it intellect and will, among other things. And now, if you take the attitude of the Rambam says this in the end of the first chapter of his essay called The 8 Chapters, because it's 8 chapters long, which is his introduction to Pirkei Avos. And there he considers two different theories about how what life works. Both were theories that were popular in his time. The Ramban brings both of them, but the Rambam chooses one, and here's the way it looks. People grow, so the trees grow. People move, so the animals move. People have senses, so the animals have senses. People ingest food and energy from the environment, so do animals. People act in different ways under different conditions, so do animals. So, does a person grow the way a tree grows? Does a person see and hear and ingest and move the way a dog moves? And then, in addition to having a little bit of tree in the person, and in addition to having a little bit of dog in the person, in addition to both of those, there's also a human soul, which has intellect and has values and has free will and so forth and so on. Is that the picture? We're a kind of compound of different features? Which was one ancient theory. Or is it that in human being, the divine soul, which has the intellect and will and other features, the intellect is what makes you grow, the intellect is what makes you see, the intellect is what makes you hear, the intellect is what makes you digest your food, the intellect is what makes you move, and that intellectual soul, of course, carries the intellect and all the rest. It all comes from the divine soul. The whole physical operation is a manifestation of the divine soul only. You don't have many souls for different features. And the Rambam says that's the truth. So now, if you make the connection between the human being on the one hand and the soul and body of the human being with God in the universe on the other hand, so then you get the idea that God's effect, God's projection of his energy projects into all aspects of the world. Some people have the idea it's a top-down picture. There's a ladder of influence, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu stands at the top and sends influences down, and they go down all by themselves. I don't know every Jewish position, but for many that's simply not true. Ramchal says it explicitly. There's a whole ladder of influences coming down, and Hashem is present at every level on the ladder. Nothing works by itself. Nothing works by itself. And the same is true of the Rambam. Nothing works by itself. So that being the case, you have a picture of, if you understand how the human being works, you have a picture of how Kodesh Baruch Hu works in the world. And by the way, just to finish this off, the Rambam is full of intellectual surprises. there is an idea that human beings are a microcosm of the world. Microcosm. So human beings are a little world, or the world is a big human being. Both phraseologies you find in our literature. So everyone says, why is that? Why is a human being a microcosm of the world? Is it because a human being has in him vegetative features and animal features, and therefore, because it includes those parts of the world in addition to his intellect, therefore he's a microcosm of the world? If the reason we're a microcosm of the world is because we have vegetative and animal features, then so is a donkey. That can't be the right explanation as to why he's a microcosm. No, says the Rambam, he's a microcosm because he contains within him a model of the world and its creator. Not because he's a microcosm of the world, the created world, but he has within him a model of the world and its creator. The human being, soul plus body, is a model of the creator and the universe. So this could very well be, by the Rambam, knew the Rambam also, and quotes the Rambam also, so it could very well be that that's at least part of what he means there. If you understand how the human being works, then you have a model by which you can understand how Kodesh Baruch Hu. If you don't understand how the human being works, then you don't have that model. That would be one way to explain it. Yeah, what's up?
What's the idea behind the cherubim? Why they're baby spaces and why they look like, why that form, with the wings and such?
The cherubim are very interesting. The cherubim, the two angels whose form is on the kaporos, which is the cover of the ark, the Aron HaKodesh, solid gold statues in the Jewish Holy of Holies. That should ruffle some feathers, but don't we believe in those statues? Not supposed to make statues? And the short answer is, when Kodesh Baruch Hu tells you to make statues, you make statues. Right? In other words, what we do is based on the will of the Creator. It's not based on principles, intuitions, ideas, values, positions. No. It's based on, and then if we can figure out on the basis of what he tells us to do certain things that are consistent, fine. But there are no independent principles. We're not against statues. We're against violating his will. End of story. And if he says to make a statue, then making a statue is right. That's number one. Now, the Rambam has a very interesting explanation of the symbolism of the cherubim. Cherubim is a name for certain types of angels, and of course, there's only symbolism. For the Rambam, angels have no physical form whatsoever. So it's just a symbol, just like the letters T, A, B, L, E aren't related to this at all. They don't look like this. They don't feel like this. They don't take up the same space. They aren't arranged in the same way. It's just a symbol. That's all. So certain physical features, like that, the Nevi'im, the prophets, saw things. They saw human figures. They saw animal figures. They saw figures of menorahs and cities and fires. They're all symbols. So these are symbols of angels. And the Rambam says one thing that they're symbolizing is this: all prophecy, except one, all prophecy is mediated by angels. All prophecy is mediated by angels. So since Kodesh Baruch Hu says that kaporos is the place of contact between me and the Jewish people, Moses and everybody else, that place where that is, you have to know that between the Creator and the prophet, there's an intermediary that carries the message, which is called angels. That's and that's why he says the reason there are two because we are a monotheistic religion, and any place where you have two statues can't be God, right? Because there's only one God. So that's why there are two. If there were one, then the outsider, the Babylonian, could say, you have a statue of your God like we have statues of our gods. Well, no thing. But not if there are two. That's one thing we're famous for. Only Moses' prophecy was not mediated by the angels, and in fact, God spoke to Moses before there was a tabernacle, before the statue came into existence. But all others. So it's there to tell you the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu interacts with the rest of the world is mediated by angels. That's one thing that it's doing there. But it has another function, a clearly miraculous function. And by the way, the first temple, which had the Aron and had the kapparos with the statues there, was a place where there were continuous miracles. The Mishnah lists 10 miracles that applied according to the Toshis Hashanim and Yuba. It was only in the first temple that they were there continuously. And that is that the position of the statues, the Kruvim, was not constant. Sometimes they were facing each other, and sometimes they were back to back with one another. The position was not constant. And that position gave an indication of the relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people. It was a kind of symptom of where they're standing vis-a-vis one another. And the source which is most poignant in this regard is when the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and they went into the Holy of Holies. They saw the two Keruvim embracing. So you think, here HaKadosh Baruch Hu is allowing his house to be destroyed. And the picture you get is a picture of an embrace. And the explanation is, suppose you have to part from someone whom you love dearly for a long time. What's the last thing you do? You give a hug of goodbye. But goodbye means not goodbye forever. I still love you. I still want you. I'm waiting for you to come back. I haven't abandoned you. If I had abandoned you, I'd turn my back on you and let you wander off on your own. No, there's a hug goodbye. So this is another thing that the Kruvim are doing. But there's a gigantic literature on the Kruvim, and I'm just scratching the surface. Yeah, what else is going on? Well, while you're thinking, let me just share an observation with you. From our point of view, questions are very important. I don't know how many of you have had the misfortune to attend university, but if you have, you know very well, you're not there to ask questions. You're there to learn what to spit back and spit it back accurately with no changes whatsoever. I often advertise the fact that yeshiva isn't like that. Here you get to ask questions, and you can ask any question you want. And you can ask a question which is even potentially insulting, if you don't know it's an insulting manner. If you're polite, why isn't atheism more logical than Judaism? And so on? Yes, whatever you like. We're not afraid of questions, and our tradition is based not only on questions but on objections. There are hundreds, if not thousands of times when the Gemara uses the word challenge, maskifla. Someone said something and somebody else attacked it. Yes, attacking what somebody says is perfectly appropriate if you're trying to get at the truth and you're trying to be objective. So is admitting you made a mistake. This is an interesting experiment to try with someone who claims to be a free thinker and claims to be very clever and educated and comes to show you your mistakes and does it in public. Ask him, when's the last time you changed your mind? I think that'll be a stopper on that, because they don't change their minds. They've learned the sound bites, they've learned the mantras, and they know how to say it and shout you down. They don't change their minds because they know for sure. Someone asked me how many times it changed my mind. I would say, you ready to give me $1 for every time I change my mind this week? At least 20 times. Because I have smart chavrusas, and we argue with one another. And half the time I have to say, oh, sorry, I'll try it again. So this is part of the attitude of not being afraid of asking questions. And that means that you should feel the self-confidence to ask questions, and you certainly will understand something better if you ask the questions that bother you, and you'll have more confidence in it if, in fact, you will get answers to those questions. When I was coming in, because I wasn't raised in a religious home, I had questions. I loved questions, and I kept them. I held on to them. And to have the experience of asking a question, and 20 years later, seeing a major commentator ask the question, so it wasn't stupid. Oh. And then get an answer that you couldn't have imagined, couldn't have dreamt up in a million years as a satisfying answer, is a very powerful message. Now, we lived in Baltimore about 107 years ago, or a little sooner. My oldest son was 8 years old, and he came home from the cheder, and this was in the 70s. And the cheder Rabbi gave him a nickel. Gave you a nickel? Why did he do that? He said, because I asked him this question. Of course, it's my son, so it was a brilliant question. So I said, what answer did he give you? And he said, he didn't give me an answer. What's the lesson? You asked a question, the teacher doesn't have an answer, and he gives you a nickel for asking the question. Yeah, there's money in asking good questions. There's money in stumping this teacher. My second son, we had already made Aliyah. He was here in Hadat Zion, up here in Cheskel. He came home, well, he didn't get money, this is Jerusalem, but he came home full of smiles. He asked a question, his teacher didn't know the answer. His teacher called the next door teacher in, they discussed it, didn't know the answer. They called the principal in, and the three of them didn't know the answer, and he came home, he stumped the staff. And that made his day. Yeah, that's how you make the day of a Jewish student. Ask tough questions. So we pride ourselves. That's why I have a Q&A. Some people rightly observe that you're fed a lot of information, and it's coming quickly, and often when you hear it in a shir, you don't have time to think about it and digest it and see whether you really understand it or not. And then 3 days later or a week later, you may come up with a question, but by that time the shir's on to a different topic. And then maybe uncomfortable to have to ask. So Rabbi Breitowitz regularly gives a Q&A, and I regularly give a Q&A, so that people will have this opportunity to explore the things that are questions for them. And knowing that you have this opportunity, when something occurs to you, jot it down, so you'll be able to get satisfaction from it. Yeah, anybody? Yeah, question?
Do you know why Sephardim wear white tallis and Ashkenazim wear the black ones?
Well, Ashkenazim don't wear black tallis, but have black. There are different aesthetics from which they came. I don't think there's a planned reason for it. I don't think so. But I'll tell you something very interesting. You've seen what they call in this country the zebra. That's that silk coat with like a frock, but it has stripes on it, brownish stripes on it, in yellow. Right? And you associate that with Jerusalemites. Yes, that's true. That is classical Sephardi dress. But, as a matter of fact, when you see someone on the street wearing that dress, you could very well be an Ashkenazi. What happened? Before the British, the Turks ran this part of the world, and at a certain point in time, they put a limit on the Jewish population of Jerusalem. There are no more Jews in Jerusalem. At that time, the population was Sephardi. And Ashkenazim were coming in. But if they look like Ashkenazim, it's going to be tough, because the Turks will say, you don't look right, get out. So these Ashkenazim took on the Sephardi dress, and they kept it. So now, when you see a Jerusalemite Jew with that Sephardi dress, you can't tell whether it's a Sephardi or not. And the same is true with the shtreimel. There are those who wear a shtreimel who aren't Hasidim at all. And yeah, so you can't make assumptions on the basis of dress, because history and sociology plays a role in it. Yeah.
You hear all the time that a person is meant to reach Shleimus. I want to ask, Rabbi, what does it mean Shleimus for a person?
So it's a very interesting question. This idea of Shleimus. Shleimus is sometimes translated as perfection. In Hebrew, it means completion, being complete. Now, it's a tricky philosophical question how to, as you ask, how to understand this idea. And one way, which I think everybody agrees is a way, the question will be whether there's a way beyond it, but one way is to start from the negative. Look at things that are definitely negative, that everything things that detract. What in Hebrew are called chesronos, lacks, things you lack. And then say, well, Shleimus would require me to overcome these. That's not the total definition, but it's certainly a way to get started. So a person who's afraid of things that aren't dangerous, we call that phobia. That's a chisaron because it prevents you from doing things that otherwise you think you should do. So it'd be good to get over that. And we have there's a Gemara that talks about this and says that the thing that you should be afraid of is failing in your service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You shouldn't be afraid of anything else. And if you are afraid of something else, well, that's a chisaron, and you'll improve your shleimus if you manage to overcome that. Temptation to sacrificing other people to your own selfishness. And that happens, I think, to everybody. You know, you get angry and you think, I've got to take revenge, or I've got to get this over. Is it good for him? Is it good for me? Is it good for the... No, I'm just like a bull in a china shop. Well, having that desire, having that impulse, is a chisaron because intellectually you know it's going to cause damage. So that's something to work on in terms of shleimus. So if you start with the negative and talk about overcoming that, that's a way that you could work towards shleimus without a full definition of the concept. And indeed, this is the way Rabbi Salanter explained the famous Gemara a famous statement in the Gemara. The Gemara says there was a difference of opinion between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Noach lo l'adam shenivra, or lo Noach lo l'adam shenivra, which is idiomatic Hebrew, and it means roughly something like man's creation was comfortable, appropriate, valid, successful, good, rich, satisfactory, positive. Man's creation satisfactory or not? And they had a difference of opinion, and they discussed it for 2.5 years. And finally, Beis Hillel caved in and said to Beis Shammai, "You're right. No, it wasn't. It wasn't." Now, let's just take into account a verse in the book of Genesis. How about that? Let's see the very beginning, the end of the first. Shem saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. That's what Shem dictated to us in the Torah. So it couldn't be that the Talmudic sages are saying, well, I know that's in the Torah, but maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, maybe it's true, maybe it's false, let's figure it out. No, that's not what's going on. So then what are they talking about? What are they asking about? Since Noach lo, or lo Noach lo sounds a lot like that, what are they in fact talking about? So Rabbi Salanter explained it as follows. They weren't asking whether it is successful. They were asking as to whether we could see why and how it's successful. Can we look at people and see who they are, and see what their challenges are, and see what their successes and failures are, and see, yeah, that's a good job. That's a job that's successful. That's a job that's worthwhile. Can we see that or not? And the difference, said Rabbi Salanter, I think I saw this from Desta, this is Rabbi Salanter, is how do I make progress? I was going back to exactly what I told you before. How do I make progress? If I could see what a successful performance looks like and understand it, then I could say, okay, so I should work myself to be more like that. And then I would go up. But if I can't see what the success is, I can't appreciate what the success is, then I work myself up, not by working towards that which is good and successful, but by working away from that which is a failure and destructive. So it has a practical effect, which according to Rabbi Salanter, as a Baal Musar, you would expect him to have that way of analyzing it. And you can certainly see things that are failures. You can certainly see things that are destructive. And when you identify certain features of that destruction in your own self, that's something you should try to overcome and push yourself away from. So I think that would be enough to say. In the beginning of the Derech Hashem, the way of God by Lusato, where he talks about perfection, and he puts back to back Shleimus and the absence of Chasronos, and there's a Vav in between, and in classical Hebrew, the Vav can be not and, but an explanation. This, because of that. And I've questioned myself how to read it. Is it that you should have Shleimus, perfection, and no deficiencies? That sounds redundant. If you have perfection, you don't have any deficiencies. Or is it that you should have Shleimus, perfection, in that you have no deficiencies? And then the definition would be negative, and be something which would be much easier to understand. I'm inclined to think that the Ramchal meant the latter, though I haven't any proof to it.
But is there like a goal point, meaning that was mitzad Adam, but is there something like this, the Shleimus is this and this, meaning, or it just goes mitzad with the
Well,
percentage?
that would only be in the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Because human beings, every new capability that you acquire can be the platform for acquiring an even higher new capability. So that growth never stops. Growth never stops. Yeshua Kohen Gadol has a vision of himself in heaven, the angels there, the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and so forth and so on. And the pasuk says, I'll give you walkways, ways to walk among these standing ones. So the commentaries explain the standing ones are the angels because they're static. Angels don't change. Angels don't grow. They don't develop. They're absolutely static. They're created in a certain way. They remain that way. Human beings aren't like that. Human beings are developing. And indeed, what did Moshe Rabbeinu say on the last day of his life? I'm dying today because I cannot go out and come in. I can't transition. I can't grow anymore. I've come to the point where I can't do anymore. That's the end of my development. And I will finish by adding what the Gemara says there, which is quite surprising. The Gemara says this was a vision of Yeshua Kohen Gadol in heaven. And he says, I'm giving you places of progressing even in heaven, which means you're not static in heaven either. Though you don't do anything there, but things happen to you. You continue to grow. On the basis of what you do here, you continue to grow and develop without your free will, but it happens to you so that you're not static even in Olam Haba. That's what the Gemara said.
I guess God created it so that when you're static, you kind of feel empty. There's a feeling of something's missing.
Yes, I think that's right. You should feel empty. You should feel that nothing's happening. And nothing's happening, like, well, why isn't something happening? 100%.
Even in Olam Haba, the reward that we get, whatever it is, it's constantly growing.
The Ramchal, yes. Ramchal says, in this world, if you have the same thing over and over again, you get bored.
Right.
There too, it's the same thing, which is a shocking thing to say, but that's what he says.